President Marcos's fourth SONA delivered headlines, but did it deliver what the business community needs? The president touched on broad themes: infrastructure, social programs, agriculture, but left out some of the most pressing issues for investors and policymakers. No mention of the 19% U.S. tariff that could cost the economy up to $6 billion a year. No guidance on fiscal consolidation, despite our national debt now at $17 trillion. Nothing on online gambling, and silence on the halted impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte. One of the few actionable proposals, however, a push to privatize $1 trillion in flood control projects. Joining us now is Apa Ongpin, the Executive Director of the Makati Business Club, to connect the dots and weigh what this SONA means for business and policy. Hi, Apa. Good morning, and thank you for being here with us.
Hi. I can't hear your audio. There's a problem.
Oh,
But
okay.
I, we discussed that we're going to talk about our overall impressions of the SONA, and we we feel that the president handled it in a managerial way. He spoke to the people. He wasn't speaking to managers. He wasn't speaking to business. But he said, "Look, these are the problems. These are the strategies that we have to solve these problems, and this is our target." So that was a pretty good outcome for us, the business community, because it was done professionally and managerially. We don't necessarily agree with all of his solutions, but they're solutions. You know what I mean? Compared to the previous presidency, this is really coherent.
Mm-hmm. Apa,
Now,
can you hear
what
me?
stood out for us was the president's declaration of war on corruption, um, which is of course controversial, um, given his family history and so
Apa,
on.
can you hear me?
But you know, great. We believe there should be a war on corruption. Where whether or not he has the agency, or this whole administration has the agency to eradicate corruption, that's an open question. But at least he's gonna try. And the private sector would like to um, offer whatever help we can in terms of trying to stamp out corruption.
Okay, we're going to be taking a quick break to try to resolve these audio issues. Business 360 will be right back. We're back with Apa Ongpin. He's the Executive Director of the Makati Business Club to discuss President Marcos's fourth State of the Nation address. Hi, Apa.
Hi, Mikey.
Okay, Apa, did President Marcos's SONA reflect the true state of the nation, and did it move the needle for the business community, the MBC in particular?
Well, the state of the nation is not really uh, a question of truth or whatever. It's how the president and his team see the state of the nation, their version, in other words. And do we agree with it? Yeah, I mean, I think they had a pretty good assessment. One of the things that stood out is that he said, yeah, there are problems, and there are problems with our delivery of basic services. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Apa,
we're
in what
we're
was
promising to do better. We're promising to deliver those basic services, and that was a very refreshingly frank approach. Past presidents usually it's a litany of their achievements and nagawa ko to, nagawa ko yan, and all of this. This president said, "Okay, look, here are the problems, and here's what we're doing to solve them."
Apa, in what was said and in what was unsaid, what stood out the most for you?
Well, what really stood out was the declaration of the war on corruption. That's really important. I mean, corruption has been a problem since um, you know independence. I mean, since the Spanish period, actually. But you know, what can we do to fight it? I mean, uh, one thing is for the president to make a stand against it, and say the executive is going to fight corruption. That's a very big first step. Not a lot of presidents do that, right?
Yeah, just after these massive weather disturbances where classes and some work was canceled, we saw flooding. And flooding is a symbol, has been seen as a symbol of a government failure and government corruption, according to some groups. Can the private sector break that cycle, Apa?
Um, that's a very good question. I don't know. I can't answer that. The reason that flood control is such a big target for corruption actually is because it's not really visible. I mean, you're not building like a flyover that everybody can see, or a building or something like this. A lot of it is dredging, a lot of it is no. So the temptation to do ghost projects where you pay someone $1 million and they just put a bit of equipment there, but they don't really do anything, obviously has been too tempting for a lot of people. But I want to take the example of Marikina. Marikina really needed to do flood control, and they spent their money well. In this last typhoon, the flooding was minimal. It was certainly a lot less than previous typhoons. So it can be done, and it can be done by the LGU in a way that really works.
Yeah.
I think that people should look at the example of Marikina and see how they did it.
Absolutely, App. I'm glad you pointed that out because it's just an example of what can be done. The president wants to turn over 1 trillion pesos worth of flood control projects to the private sector. Business groups agree with this decision. The Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industries, Brian Ang, says that it should be turned over to proven conglomerates. They should lead that charge. What is the stance of the Makati Business Club per se, Apa?
I wouldn't know what. I haven't done a survey of the members or anything. I don't know what the members think. But I mean, naturally, as representatives of the private sector, we like this challenge. No, I mean, this is something that the private sector might be good at. I mean, when you look at the big contractors, the sort of DMCIs of this world, right? These guys are excellent engineers, and they might be able to solve this problem, you know, uh, if given the opportunity in a corruption-free environment.
Now, Appa, the challenge now is to turn this from a call to action to actual policy. What can the business community do to possibly shape a viable PPP model for flood mitigation?
Um, yeah, that's another excellent question. It's going to take a while to work that out, but I'm sure we can do it. I'm sure we can come out with a very good business model for that.
Yeah, okay. Other things not mentioned in the SONA, APA, our national debt, our sovereign debt is at a fresh record and it just keeps going higher. We're exceeding 17 trillion pesos now. What are your thoughts on this?
It's not as much of a concern as in the, uh, in the, for instance, the Cory era, right? We had a huge national debt and it was crippling us. We couldn't spend money on things like infrastructure and social services and education and stuff like that because we were busy servicing debt. This amount of debt seems to be manageable. Okay, it still left us with enough funds to uh, fund, various things. And not that, I'm a big fan of the 2025 budget. We've spoken out against it. No, but clearly the level of debt is still, I guess, manageable.
manageable but still climbing. Where should we draw the line between necessary spending and fiscal risk, in your opinion?
Well, that's really up to the Secretary of Finance and the President. No, they, they've got to find that balance.
Right. Speaking of, the economic cluster, they come from the private sector. What are your thoughts on how they performed thus far and the work that has to be done ahead of them as we have these 19% tariff with the U.S.? What are your thoughts on where we are in this economic junction, Apa?
I'd like to, I failed to commend the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, during my live interview during the SONA. So I'd like to do that now. The Makati Business Club would like to express our appreciation for the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas' role in controlling inflation, which we consider to be a key priority of any administration, because inflation hurts the poor the most. And they were able to bring it down from nearly 7% to sub 2%, and yet maintain the 5 or 5.5% growth, in GDP. And that is an achievement. I mean, obviously, the whole economic cluster plays a role in this, but the main lever in terms of controlling inflation is the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. No? And then with regard to the performance of the rest of the team, we're pretty happy with the performance. In the private sector, we just hope that government will get out of the way. We're not looking to them to lead us or tell us what to do, right? We just want them to create an environment where we can do business, unhindered, right? So we feel, this government has been responsive to us, and they've done pretty well.
Yeah, they have done pretty well, maintaining healthy growth. Inflation has been benign amidst all the external headwinds. So as we move forward, Apa, in order to have this unhindered path for doing business, what would you like to see from Congress over perhaps the next 6 months to pave the way for unhindered business?
We have a whole list of bills for various financial reform, freedom of information, and so on. No, it's a very technical list. I mean, one of them, for instance, allows private sector investment into the national grid. And diluting the monopoly of NGCP. All of these things these bills have been sitting there. The Freedom of Information bill has been there for 30 years. We've been trying to get that passed for 30 years. So let's try again. Every Congress, we relaunch these efforts, and we try to lobby for Congress to even talk about them. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Earlier you mentioned the tariff thing, no? And I just wanted to say that that's a highly technical issue. We're not really willing. The MBC is not really willing to give a grade or a score to the president on this deal that he cut with the Trump administration. Certainly not until the details come out. A very important detail is that we had an exemption for our major export, which is
electronics and semiconductors.
Before this whole Trump tariff thing. And we don't know if that exemption is maintained. And I'm hoping it will be, because if it will be, then it's a really good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we don't know. As I said, the technical details of this thing are really, up in the air. So that's to be negotiated by the economic cluster at the ministerial level.
Yeah, that's right. We have yet to iron out the details on that. Hopefully electronics and semiconductors get that reprieve, continue to get that reprieve. As we look ahead, Apa, what gives you hope with the economic direction of the Philippines against all these external headwinds?
Um, well, you know, our economy is still standing on basically three legs. No, it's BPOs, OFWs, and you know, to a large extent, retail or services. So we see the possibility that we go into a more developmental focus, um, where people will start realizing that you need to build the market, you need to raise incomes of the lowest levels of Philippine economy and society. No, uh, basically, we've got to eradicate poverty, and I think the government is on track. They could be more focused on it, but all right, look, um, at least there is a lot of attention paid to it now, and that's what gives me hope, because that's the future of this country. We've got to eradicate poverty.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a very big moral responsibility. As we talk a lot about the economic trajectory of the country, but I also wanted to ask you about the moral trajectory of this country, especially as the Supreme Court ruled to halt Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment trial. What does this say to you about accountability, the rule of law, and where we are morally and ethically, perhaps, at this junction?
The Makati Business Club, you know, we insisted that the trial should go through. And we said uh, we have to demonstrate that there is a rule of law in this country and that people won't be able to get away with just anything. And, accountability is always, it's always a very important priority for us. But the Supreme Court ruling really shows, look, this is the rule of law. We have to accept it. I mean, we don't like it, but that's the rule of law. So, okay, accountability will be delayed, but we are going to press for that accountability nevertheless. Okay, so if we have to file another articles of impeachment in 2026, we're going to do it, right? We have to accept what the Supreme Court has done, um, whether we like it or not, because that is the rule of law.
All right, Apa Ongpin, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the SONA and more. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Mikey.